Alright guys, the moment we've all been waiting for here, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is pretty much out at this point, and we've got the reviews to go over. In this review roundup, we're going to be looking at the high reviews, the middle reviews, and the low reviews to kind of get a sense of how these Pokemon games are doing. So right now on Metacritic, the score is a 78 with 35 reviews at this point. Now later, there will be more reviews. The score could go up or it could go down, so keep that in mind. Now on Metacritic, anything with a 74 or so to 60, or maybe even a bit lower, that is a mixed review, so yellow. Anything at a 75 and up is a positive. So right now, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is looking okay. It's got 24 positive reviews and it's got 11 mixed reviews, but right now it has 0 negative reviews, which once again, that could change. It's going to go up and down based off of the new scores that are coming in quite a bit. So let's go ahead and jump into the top score for the game here, and that's from the enemy. They gave it a 10 out of 10, so very interesting here, especially considering some of the technical issues that I've already read this game has, but let's hear what they had to say about it first. So 10 out of 10 from the enemy, and they had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's technical problems and lackluster multiplayer are unable to overshadow its triumphant leap into an open world. Compelling characters, a huge batch of new creatures, and an excellent OST help the titles on their mission to renovate the franchise. They celebrate everything that makes Pokemon games endearing: the mysteries, the surprises, the feeling of freedom, and in doing so, create an experience that's probably the best in the entire main series. So very interesting from there. The enemy really liked this game. Now, next up is from Atomics, and they gave the game a 9 out of 10 and had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are very worth it. This is a fantastic wrap up to a great year on the Nintendo Switch, and I can't wait to see how Game Freak and the Pokemon Company take everything that worked here and expand on it in the future. So very interesting from Atomics there. Next up is from Screen Rant. They gave the game a 9 out of 10 and had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is a must-play adventure for everyone, even for those who have yet to take the first step on their own Pokemon journey. Okay, very good there. Now, next up, we're going to go ahead and get into the 8 out of 10 reviews. This is from games.ch, and they had this to say with an 8.5. With their open world concept of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Game Freak does a great job. Nearly from the start on, the players are free to explore the diverse region of Paldea and in the way in which order they want to deal with the main story mission branches. There is some room for having an imbalanced gaming experience in that, but thanks to clever world design with some natural boundaries, the game is as good or worse as its predecessors on that point. The biggest weak spot consists of the technical flaws, mainly based on the limited hardware power of Switch. Still, these imperfections can't ruin an overall great experience Pokemon fans will love. And I see this kind of come up when it comes to the Pokemon games and everything, and I'm not sure if it's the hardware power of the Switch, more so it's Game Freak and what they do on the system, based off of what I've seen at least. I mean, we just got Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I think it's interesting that some people are quick to blame that when Game Freak has kind of been known to Game Freak things when it comes to their open-ended games on the Nintendo Switch, at least with Pokemon Sword and Shield and also with this game, but hey, interesting nonetheless. Next up is from Metro Game Central. They gave it an 8 out of 10, and I had this to say: a significant advancement on Pokemon Sword and Shield, and while it's not hard to see how it could be improved further, this is the most ambitious and entertaining Pokemon has been in a long while. So interesting, more entertaining to them than Pokemon Legends Arceus. Next up is from VG247. They gave it an 8 out of 10 and had this to say: perhaps the best thing I can say is that the game feels more like the anime than ever. Part of that is down to the art, which continues to advance closer to the TV show. Part of that is down to the sense of openness, which imparts a real feeling that this is your adventure, and not just a roller coaster where you experience somebody else's. On balance, Legends Arceus probably just pips it based on the novelty factor of its entirely different approach. But Scarlet and Violet is a delightful vibe, and that vibe is difficult to diminish. What a year to be a Pokemon fan. Now, next up is from GameSpot with an 8 out of 10, and they had this to say: while undercooked presentation and visual issues hold the games back, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are still the best mainline Pokemon games in years. They build off Pokemon Legends Arceus' open world design in some thoughtful and surprising ways, and retain that same level of depth that the mainline series is known 4. So very interesting from GameSpot. I thought they would maybe even do a lower score considering, but hey, it is what it is. 8 out of 10 on that one. Next up is from Games Hub with an 8 out of 10 and had this to say: while Scarlet and Violet are a complete reinvention of the formula, the technical performance issues certainly hold them back. There's still an essential leap forward, both in storytelling and gameplay mechanics. New features and clever tweaks along the way make this adventure feel fresh and encouraging in ways that past games haven't. As a reinvigoration of the Pokemon formula, Scarlet and Violet are some of the best modern games in the long-running franchise. Okay, very interesting there. Next up is from VGC with an 8 out of 10, and they had this to say: the huge expansion and changes to the single-player campaign are great. The size of the world and joy of exploration are the best in the series, and the new Pokemon and battle mechanics introduced all sing. However, it's just impossible to shake the thought of how much better the game would feel if it was on more powerful hardware or simply ran acceptably on Switch. So there you go. Once again, the technical issues are something that, yes, the game's good, but there are issues there with the performance of the frame rate and even the look and the visuals of the game. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the 7 out of 10 scores here, guys. So every I.IT gave it a 7.5 out of 10 and had this to say: summing up the new Pokemon game always means triggering a conflict between heart and head. By heart, among other things, Scarlet and Violet have plenty to sell. Although very diluted and with a very staid pace, the plot entertains and surprises, especially at the end. And the many supporting actors of this new epic are among the funniest and most intriguing of the entire franchise. Overall, Game Freak packs a fun and content-rich adventure despite some of the new features not fully convincing. The open world works, but at the same time is limited by a great underlying repetitiveness, while some of the most interesting achievements achieved by the spin-off of Arceus have been revised and adapted, not always positively, for the new formula. Unfortunately, to weigh on the final judgment are the many technical problems on which it is now really impossible to postpone, in the hope the development team sooner or later will be able to align their productions with current generational standards. We can still assert that the new pair of Pokemon games is interesting. So definitely a full and kind of comprehensive look at the positives and the negatives of the game. Next up, 7.5 from XGN, and they had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet takes the next step for the franchise thanks to the lush open world. Even the new terastallizing mechanic is great fun, although it is kind of a reskin of an earlier mechanic. Amazing music and some smart design choices make it a game you can't miss. At least that is what we would have said if the performance wasn't as bad as it is. So which one is it? Can you not miss it or not? Give it a 7.5. So maybe you can miss it. Next up is from Press Start Australia with a 7.5 out of 10, and they have this to say: while there's still many stumbling missteps as Game Freak try to find their footing in the future of Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet is an endearing and enjoyable attempt at a fundamentally different Pokemon experience. New ideas, some quality of life improvements, and some excellent new Pokemon designs make the trip to Paldea worthwhile. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the mixed scores here, guys. This is going to be 74 all the way through to 60. So first up is from PC Games, and they gave it a 7 out of 10 and had this to say: anyone who can overlook the difficulties will still have fun with the new generation. After all, the core remains collecting medals and completing the Pokedex, which is also entertaining in the new additions. Coupled with the open structure, maybe the Pokemon Company will be able to fix the current construction sites for the 10th generation in a few years. All right, very interesting there. Next up is from Digital Trends with a 7 out of 10, and they had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is a real step forward for the series that's been locked in a holding pattern for well over a decade. The open world pivot successfully reinvigorates a stale premise by giving trainers more control over the pace and difficulty of their journey. Like every recent Pokemon game, however, deteriorating tech and half-hearted experimentation still makes it feel like we're 5 years away from the franchise's true return to glory. From the Game Boy or DS days, let's go. 5 years, let's get it. All right, next up is from Nintendo Life with a 7 out of 10, and they had this to say: There are still plenty more ways we'd like to see the Pokemon franchise evolve, but Scarlet and Violet has us excited about the series' future. We really hope Game Freak can figure out how to smooth out the series. Ongoing performance issues on Switch, because they'll certainly rub some players the wrong way, and they're going to become a serious detriment over time. Scarlet and Violet's most fun and exciting when you're just exploring the world, and while there are many small new details and improvements to the Pokemon formula, it still plays it safe in a few areas. Regardless, things point to a promising future for Gen 9 and beyond. It's a smaller step than many have hoped for, especially considering what Pokemon Legends Arceus did, but it's definitely one in the right direction. Yeah, Pokemon Legends Arceus, obviously, you know, the Pokeball catching mechanic and everything, but it seems like they're going to be separating the two experiences from what Pokemon Legends does and what this does, because I think that Pokemon Legends, we're probably going to see a new Pokemon Legends game next year or the year after. Like, I don't think a new game is very far off, in my opinion, so I think that they're trying to separate the two in terms of what they do from a single player experience and the mechanics compared to the traditional Pokemon experience. So interesting there. Next up is from Shaq News. They gave it a 7 out of 10 and had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have some excellent ideas that push the franchise in a fresh direction, but they're unfortunately bogged down by unacceptable performance problems at every single turn. While my biggest problems with the games could theoretically be addressed in future patches, I'm not sure how feasible that is given the capabilities of Switch's hardware. That said, there is still a lot to enjoy, but it's hard imagining these games have a wide appeal outside of the dedicated Pokemon fans that are willing to put up with the issues and inconvenience. Oh man, I don't think he understands how big the Pokemon franchise is. There's going to be people that pretty much play this game like crazy. It's more than just dedicated Pokemon fans. But yeah, we'll definitely see in terms of how everything plays out. Now, next up is from the 6th Axis. They gave the game a 7 out of 10 and had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet feel like an awkward second evolution of one of its starters. It's growing into something resplendent. It's showing signs of an exciting second type, but it's got that weird vibe of a 20-something that hasn't quite figured out who they actually are. Add that really stretched feeling to the consistent technical oddities, and you've got a game that's undoubtedly good fun, but it's still not even its final form. I can't wait to see what Pokemon becomes, but it's not quite there yet. So very interesting, and I agree with a lot of like the technical type of situations that people are talking about here, the issues as well. Now we're gonna go ahead and move into the 60s scores here, guys. This one comes from Nintendo. They gave it a 6.8 out of 10 and had this to say: Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have failed as open world games. Its premise with 3 routes seems original, but it becomes a repetitive task in which some mini games in the gyms are really boring. Although the Pokemon are better recreated than ever in their wild environments, the overall performance of the game is terrible, affecting the gameplay and giving the impression that we're playing an incomplete game. So very interesting. I think that score should be lower then, right? Nintendo with a 6.8 probably should be more like a 5.8. No, it's all good. You got to read the full review to get the context of everything that they're saying there. Games Radar Plus with a 6 out of 10, and they had this to say: the basic mechanics of Pokemon remain largely untouched. It's still catching, battling, and training as you remember it, and while that may be enough for many devotees, Generation 9 is still a tougher sell for those who need more of a reason to engage with the series, impacted as it is by technical issues, mechanical oversights, and a lack of vision. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet should have been a bright and bold entry that sets up the series for future expansions, but an attempt to modernize while staying loyal to the past hasn't really succeeded in doing either one, and the headache doesn't help to boot. Okay, very interesting from Games Radar Plus. Not liking it that much. Guardian with a 6 out of 10 and had this to say: Game Freak draws up an exciting open world blueprint for the Pokemon franchise, but appears to have lacked the time and know-how to deliver it to spec. Compare this with June's gorgeous Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which actually came out in July, which runs on the same console. It's hard to shake the feeling that you're beta testing an open world Pokemon. With more time in the oven, this could have been genuinely exciting. As it stands, this fun-filled adventure asks you to put up with an awful lot more of the rough than the smooth. So I think overall we can get a very good idea of how these games are kind of shaking out. The game has a lot of cool and interesting ideas. Some of them are executed really well, some of them aren't necessarily executed the best, but there's fun to be had, while the technical issues do put a hamper on the overall experience. So when you guys are deciding if you're going to get the game or not, you have to factor all of that in. And remember, guys, these are just opinions of some reviewers out there. So it was interesting to kind of look and see what everyone was saying. And I think that, yeah, some people talk about the performance of the console when it comes to Nintendo Switch, but we just got Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and there was only like one reviewer that mentioned it, at least in the ending segment there. One of the reviewers said, hey, like, look, we got Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that runs better and looks better in terms of things. So I do think that part of it could be the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, you know, a more powerful system could help out there, but I think also another part of it is just Game Freak and their inexperience at this point, not necessarily being able to create the type of lush open worlds and things that other developers on the same platform have been able to do. So we'll see if Game Freak can actually improve upon the experience going into whatever Nintendo is doing next, or if they make another one on the regular Nintendo Switch, but interesting nonetheless. So what are your thoughts on this, guys, when it comes to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Do you plan on picking up the game or not? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and we will see you for the next video. Peace.